So I did my paper on Diversity Divides in Nature in Dawn by Octavia Butler. So first off, Dawn is about a woman named Lilith who was awakened 250 years after the end of the world by a race of aliens called the Oankali, who want her to help adjust people to living on Earth again. They were put into cryo sleep, essentially, to help, keep them alive while this alien race tries to, in their way, heal the Earth so it's habitable for humans again. So through this book, we see many examples of racism, cultural diversity, the divide of genders in a hierarchy, and a strong relationship between the human and alien species with nature. So first off, the author is Octavia E. Butler. She's a woman of color whose origins stem from the Louisiana area. She was actually the first woman in her family to get an education. Her grandma was a laborer, and her mom was pulled from school early to help provide for her family. An interview that she partook in by Charles Rowell, she said that she was able to go inside and hear people talk about or to her mother in ways that were obviously disrespectful. As a child, I did not blame them, but I blamed my mother for taking it. I didn't really understand. But as she grew older, she started to see that this was blatant sexism and racism, and channeled how she was feeling about it into her writing to show whoever picked it up how women were actually treated and why that's not okay. So this video is just a short, little minute and a half video that kind of explains what Dawn meant to people, especially authors, women of color authors specifically, and how she wrote what was real to her and how that inspired people. So we're going to play that.
I was a teenager, and I was working my way through the science fiction stack and had seen Dawn a few times, and then started reading it, and I had no idea on reading this that she was black, and yet about maybe 20 pages into it, I hit this point where I was like, wait a minute. I had that instant sense of, wait a minute, this character, Lilith Ayapo, is me. I had always thought of science fiction and fantasy as something that I could enjoy, but it wasn't really meant for me, that I was kind of sneaking into it. But she was right there in it, which told me I could be too. Everyone that I've talked to, as I go to conventions and, various events for writers, I meet, there's probably 30 or 40 black writers that are publishing short stories, novels, and so forth in the genre right now. And every one of them is here because Octavia Butler went first. She spoke a lot to issues of women trying to lead and dealing with overt sexism and subtle sexism, dealing with their own internalized sexism. But I don't think that was intentional. I think she was just simply writing a realistic experience of a female character in a diverse and complex world. Butler's fiction went right to the worst that I was seeing in the real world around me. But then she also suggested we can still do better. We can still survive, grow, change, improve.
So the first topic we're going to talk about is diversity. So diversity is very prevalent in the book. Your main character is a black woman, and you see other characters of other races because they're just people that have been pulled from the earth in pretty much any spot. You also have an entire alien race that is almost nothing like humans, and what we have here is a diagram someone drew up based on the descriptions in the book. They may have a slightly humanoid shape, but look nothing like us. And with all these different types of beings in the novel, there's bound to be tensions, and a lot of these are between the different species, and there's even some between the genders, which with our world is to be expected. So, along with the diversity among people, you see a lot of diversity through the cultures between the Oankali and the humans. One example of this is the Oankali don't understand consent the way humans do. They just kind of do what they think is best without asking permission because that's what their culture is. In our culture, that is not how it is. We are you ask for permission. And we see this right away when Lilith is awakened for the first time in the book, and she has a new scar that is actually from a surgery they performed on her without her knowing. And in the quote you see on this slide, you can read through, and it says that she felt like she didn't own herself any longer. Felt like her flesh could be stitched without her consent or knowledge. So to her, this was a serious violation of her as a human, and she didn't feel like herself anymore. And an article written by Christina Braid. It says, the soft-spoken and gentle disposition of the aliens, however, contrasts the antagonistic humans of the story, whose defensive nature can be attributed to their feelings of captivity and oppression. The Oankali don't understand boundaries the way we do. And we see this, again, later in the book when the Oankali start relations with the humans without their consent. The humans didn't want these relations. They were forced into them and, in a way, drugged, which is very, very heavily, in our culture, would be considered sexual assault. But along with these things, we also see a lot of racism. So it's the treatment of the Oankali by the humans, and even within the treatment of the humans by the humans. So the humans shy away from the Oankali because they see them as too different from them. And at first it's not purposeful, their bodies react without them even knowing. But there's some like Lilith that recognize that this is wrong. She has seen stuff like this her entire life towards her, and she doesn't want that towards other people, even if it's an alien, not a normal, like a stereotypical human. And there, in an article about survival in the novel, it says, the force of the xenophobia transcends rational thought. She was only able to rationalize the many ways her Oankali keeper is like her. They have 2 hands and 2 feet, and it's not as ugly as it was at first sight. She becomes frustrated with herself when she cannot quell the feelings of aversion. She doesn't understand why she's afraid. This shows us how racism, or even just the judgment of what we aren't used to, is deeply rooted in our being. But for some, it's obviously more surface level than others. Lilith fights it. She wants to accept them. We also see a very strong gender divide amongst just the humans. People automatically begin trying to pair up so everyone has a mate of sense. And there was a woman who didn't want to pair up. She just wanted to be alone. She had just woken up, didn't know what was going on. And the men try to force her while Lilith is away in her room. And Lilith comes out and yells and tells them that there will be no rape in their community. They're not cavemen. They are evolved people. But many of the men didn't want to listen to Lilith because of her gender and her race. They didn't feel like a woman was fit to lead them, and Lilith ended up having to show force so the men understood. She didn't want to become violent with them, but she did, and she slightly earned their respect but also feared them because of her relation with the Oankali, because she had been living among them for so much longer. Along with the gender divide, we see a very clear hierarchy amongst just the people and the Oankali. So it kind of automatically started when she started waking people up and they gravitated towards one person leading and everyone else kind of following suit. The men tried to push the men towards the front, even though Lilith is the best option. She has been living with the Oankali and understands better than anyone else what's going on, and they chose her to lead. But, you know, as an article says, as a futuristic figure, she must remain alert to the dangers that press in, both from the Oankali and from the humans. Specifically, she accepts that the Oankali possess the best possibility for human survival, even if that survival requires human adaptation and evolution. So even though Lilith is in charge of the humans she recognized the Oankali as a species rank above her. The Oankali don't have a hierarchy in the way humans do, but they know the humans rank below them because they can't all do the same things. In form of the Oankali can have that genetic makeup that lets them change the genetic makeup of others. And so that, in their mind, ranks them above the humans. So on the next slide with hierarchies, I created this graph that shows kind of the ranking of what the ship was. So the Oankali are at the top. They are like top dog. No one outranks them. And then the ship that they're on is next. It's not actually a ship. It's a living being. They have so much respect for it, and the Oankali trade with it. They don't just take away from nature like the humans do, which is how they rank above them. The Oankali respect the trade. They don't respect people just taking. So underneath the ship is Lilith. She ranks above most of the other people because she's been living among them and is kind of the ambassador to the people. Then the rest of the people are below her. They're essentially nothing in the realm of this society. But the Oankali feel like they have a right to be acting the way they are, but this just shows that they don't understand humans as well as they think. Like, humans are not just genetic code. And this article by Braid says, since Oankali do not take seriously the human imaginative viewpoint, they label humans as ignorant, at once dismantling their capacity to choose an independent lifestyle for themselves and removing their right to disapprove of alien decisions. This authoritative mentality moves the Oankali to interpret their methods thoughts and decisions about humans in a way that suits their oversimplified sense of what is for the common good. The Oankali just take away the free choice of the people, which, if they knew history, would know that never leads anywhere good for humans. We don't like to be imprisoned. We don't like being told what to do. This is probably why the Oankali had to save the people, as they destroyed themselves. They started this war that was probably over the humans not wanting to listen to other humans in the world. So, the last bit of this is the connection to nature. So, the Oankali have a very different connection with nature than the humans do. As I said earlier, the humans tend to just take what they need and they don't think long term, while the Oankali have a much more mutualistic relationship. They take, but they also provide. An article about this says the symbiotic and mutualistic lifestyles extend beyond the personalized communities dotted through the Oankali environment. Each microcomponent within the macro, which is the ship, is responsible for itself as well as the organisms by which it's surrounded. So nature and the Oankali look out and take care of each other to keep the world working. We see this when they use the nature to kind of form houses and just structures to keep the people contained. The nature works with the Oankali. Humans just kind of take away, and the humans end up paying for it, and they end up lower on the food chain because that's just not respected in the community the same way as the trade is. And so that is the end of my presentation. These are my sources, all the images I used, and the video. Thank you for watching.